Here live in the audience we have Charles Pierce Jr. And Charles, if any of you have seen the new movie, there is actually a character of Charles Pierce Jr. Whose name was licensed to be used in the movie from the real Charles Pierce Jr. And I don't want to give away the storyline if those of you who haven't seen it, but let's just say that if any of you are familiar with the hero's journey and the wise old man, where the main character in the movie goes to learn something important from the wise old man, Charles Pierce Jr. is that wise old man in this movie. That's the archetype that he plays in this movie, or that the character who acts as Charles Pierce Jr. plays. And I'll also say that the actor who plays Charles Pierce Jr., Dennis O'Hare, is probably the best actor in the movie. He's a very good actor, and if you haven't seen the movie, you should see it to see his portrayal in and of itself. It's quite good. So we're very honored to have Charles Pierce Jr. here today, who knows his dad very well. And of course, also we're honored to have Pam long distance. I've been talking with Pam for a longer period of time than Charles, also known as Chuck. You go by Chuck, so I might call you Chuck if that's okay. I've been talking with Pam several months, and originally, as some of you know who might have followed the scheduling, we originally had Pam on the docket. And then when I saw the movie, I said, oh man, we gotta get Charles Pierce Jr. That'd be great. So we did, and he agreed. So thank you for being here. Pam also, of course, knows her father very well, but she's been living up, still does live in New Hampshire. We've talked about a lot of the aspects of the making of the movie, and I basically want this section of today's presentation to allow really a conversation between Pam and Chuck and myself, and I'm going to try to keep a low profile unless if there's any particular, I have all kinds of questions, but I'll try to interject a question unless they say, John, what questions do you have or something. But I look forward to hearing them both together talk, because I haven't had you in the same room, so to speak, at the same time. Let's see. Pam, I guess I know your daughter is following in the tradition of creativity and movie making and set design, so it's a family tradition beyond just that of your generation, your own children, so that's another thing I wanted to say today. So if you hear the name of Chloe Barcelou and the new movie Amy in a Cage, that's another one that has the Pierce tradition and influence. Pam, am I leaving anything else out?
No, we have a second actually filmmaker too, Olivia, another one of my dad's granddaughters, who just turned 13, is actually a little filmmaker in her own right. She's won several contests and has quite a following on Instagram, and she looks like she'll go in that same direction as my dad, into some kind of creative art. So it has to run in the blood. Skipped over me, I guess.
I think you've been a tremendous guiding influence in our lives, and so I think you're being humble. Well, let me bring up your brother. Your brother's, he's in the auditorium, so let me, Mr. Charles Pierce Jr., folks. And I'm going to sit at the table and Charles, let you stand by the microphone. I'll let you sit my
Hey, big sis. How you doing? I love you.
That's good, bud. Well, we're really glad to be able to speak on behalf of our dad, and both Chuck and I agree that he would be so honored and so proud to be remembered like this, and to have MGM like we making the Town That Dreaded Sundown. I know is just thrilled and beyond measure.
I didn't write anything down for this today. I was just going to speak from the heart. And if you want to ask me some questions, if anyone wants to ask questions, that'd be fine with me. I'll answer them to the best of my ability or the best of my knowledge. My father, he didn't call them movies. He called them pictures and films. He would say something like, son, we're fixing to shoot us a picture. He would say, son, I think we have a good film here. Anyway, looks like I guess I'm gonna have to shoot one day. I know how to pull focus. I wrote the mags for Dad. Dad was a great artist. He was an illustrator. In my opinion, he paved the way for a lot of people. That's what I understand. I'm so proud to be a part of this life and proud to be here. I don't really know what to say other than that. I was in 10 of his movies, 9 or 10. I knew Earl Smith, the man was talking about. He wrote, taught my daddy how to write his first screenplay, his first script. And they wrote a script together called The Class of '69, and Clint Eastwood bought it from him, and it became such impact. Go ahead, back in my day, that's what my grandpa used to tell my daddy when he'd go to the grocery store in Hampton, Arkansas, where they grew up, and he'd say something like, boys, you can play all day long, but when I get back, if you don't get your chores done, you're going to make my day. He meant that he was going to give a whooping. Anyway, Pam, take it away from me. I don't know what to say. I'm just spellbound and flabbergasted up on this stage today.
John and I talked a little bit before about McQuarrie, Ralph McQuarrie, and connection between Dad and both the Legend of Bobby Creek and the Town That Dreaded Sundown, which was originally called The Spanner, and his part in it, and how we believe that it played into Darth Vader, what later became Darth Vader, and even Chewbacca. And it's kind of an interesting line. I remember you guys talked about that earlier. I haven't seen the new film, but I have seen the trailer. And it almost sounds to me that the killer has a Darth Vader kind of tone to his voice. And this afternoon I've been reading Presley's new book that's just coming out. And it says that the girl recognized before that she could identify the killer by his voice. That was kind of interesting to me. A lot of it I've forgotten. I just remember snippets from being, I was in the 6th grade at the summer that my dad shot Dreaded Sundown. So I was coming and going with my friends. I wasn't there every day. They were mostly at King's Row Inn, for anybody that remembers. A lot of the sets stayed there. Bob Harrison, who's now the chief of police in Texarkana, Arkansas, was head of security. I think he was young back then. And then later on, he played Mr. Reed, Richard Reed, as Don Rowe's husband. And so I just recently saw Dawn in Boston. She just wrote a book. She told me that she auditioned for the part of the psychiatrist in the new film, but apparently they got enough out of Chuck that they didn't need her participation in that one. So,
Hey, I'm thinking about writing a book myself. I'm gonna take a picture. I got a picture of me and Dad in tuxedos when I was a little boy. It's gonna be called The Charles P. Pierce Story. To know the man was to be his son. You think I'll sell a copy?
Well, I think that Chuck probably knew our dad better than most people. He spent a lot of time with Dad, and he definitely was his namesake.
Could I interject a question about your role as a consultant in the new movie?
Yes.
I went to one of the premieres, not the original, but the Hollywood premiere, and Alfonso.
I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, yeah, it's not actually about the plot, but the director, Alfonso Gomez-Rejon, mentioned that
Very nice man.
Yeah, and he met with you a few times, but the interesting thing that a lot of people here might not know is that Charles Pierce Jr. actually influenced the plot of the new movie in substantial ways. They actually altered their screenplay based on your input and ideas that they got you in those conversations with Alfonso Gomez-Rejon. I'm just wondering if you might talk about those meetings with them and what you might have discussed.
Well, we spoke. I met with Alfonso and the producer. And we went out to eat. They took me out to eat, and we talked about it. And they asked if I would consider that. They didn't want me to play the part. They wanted someone to portray me. And I said, I have no problem with that. And he used my name in the film. And we went out several times. And then the actor came down, and I told him everything I knew about the Phantom Killer. my opinion, Yul Sweeney's the Phantom Killer, but I mean, that's what I think. I mean, I don't have...
I was told, I'm going to tell you too, I was told by my dad that it was Yul Sweeney. I remember my dad came up to me one afternoon and he said, you want to see who the Phantom Killer was? And I said, you ain't know? And he said, well, yeah, that's us. You know, he said, this is, you know, he handed me the mug shot. And it was given to him by the police department. And I remember from then on, he carried that mug shot in his wallet. I mean, it's like later on, it was all crinkled up. But he would take it out sometimes and show people.
Yeah, Dad carried that picture because he was scared if Yul Sweeney got out. But Yul Sweeney did write that letter at one time, or so Dad said, and told him, I am the Phantom Killer. And I know another guy that's an old man, he robbed a bank one time. Not one of my friends, but he robbed a bank, and then he went to prison for a long time. He got out of prison and he went and robbed the same bank again. He said, I just rather live in prison. And he was talking to somebody, and he said, Yul Sweeney is the Phantom Killer. And I said, that's what I think too. And he said, I said, how do you know Yul Sweeney's the Phantom Killer? He said, I spent 12 years in a prison cell with him. And finally he admitted he was the Phantom, but he always said he wasn't the Phantom. But then one day he said, I am the Phantom Killer. So anyway, that's all I can take on that one. I believe the guy though. I believe my daddy, and when Dad was making Sundown, Yul Sweeney wrote him a letter and said, if you're making a movie about me, I want it to be authentic as possible. And he said, I am the Phantom Killer. But they could never convict him as being the Phantom Killer. They convicted him for like other petty things and stuff. But what I understand, he had I don't know if I can say this, he had syphilis, like Al Capone had and stuff. And that's why I understand he never raped the women, he just chewed on them, is what my daddy said. And I understand that my daddy put the trombone in there, but he told me she played the sax. He just did it for Hollywood, different things to switch stuff around. But this lady was married to Yul Sweeney. She wasn't married to him. They were in like the Two States Motel down here in 1946. You could rent a room for a month or something. And he had her tied up, and he'd come and tell her, see what you made me do, and he'd pay the radio for her. And then they found her in there, and she said, he is the Phantom. They took him to the best of my understanding, they took him to jail, and then she goes up to visit him and marries him in jail and threw out her testimony. That's what I understand. I don't know if that's correct. I'm a 1964 model. I wasn't around in 46. I'm 50 years old, but I was born in 64.
Actually, I was wondering, Pam and Chuck, if you might talk a little bit about the choice of featuring the Paramount Theater in the original Town That Dreaded Sundown, because one thing I know that the new movie bills itself as a meta-sequel. They sort of have all these self-referential things, the movie within the movie, and referencing the true crimes. And in some ways, the original Town That Dreaded Sundown was a meta movie because it actually had the movie playing inside the movie. Pam, I'm wondering if you might talk a little. I know you mentioned that, and Chuck might have some thoughts about it too. But Pam, I know you mentioned in particular where that idea had come from. Oh, we might have lost you. Can you hear us, Pam?
I missed it. It was vibrating, Dr. John. I couldn't understand.
Okay. I might have been too far from the cell phone. I was just wondering if you might talk about the idea to feature Paramount Theater in the original Town That Dreaded Sundown, such that the movie, it was a kind of a meta approach even in 1976.
Yeah, I was originally, after the success of What's There About the Creek, almost immediately they wanted my father to make a remake. And he really didn't want to. He held off for a really long time. But he planned on doing Phantom pretty early on. That was an early script that he had started just noticed recently that he actually did not have a writing credit on it. Earl Smith has the only writing credit on it. But my dad would do that sometimes because he didn't want his name to be all over the movie. And so by that time, he was through his fifth movie, and he was probably, he was doing pretty well. So I'm guessing that he just let Earl take full writing credit. But he had actually written it years before. And so as they were coming up at the ending, my parents were still married at that time. My parents were actually divorcing during Town That Dreaded Sundown. So prior to that, they would discuss the different scenes and that kind of stuff. And my mom came up with the ending, having it, they talked about, having the killer identified throughout, of course, with the mask, but also with the broken boots. And so it was my mom's idea to have the world premiere with the clay lights going around at the Paramount and then pan down and show the broken boots. So it's very interesting because my dad really didn't want anyone to know that a killer had, been identified or whatever. It was basically, he perpetuated that idea that the killer was still on the loose and could be sitting in the theater next to you, or, could be your neighbor, or, just a regular person. But it was my mom's idea, and just recently, my husband pointed out that he had seen or read something on Andy Prine, the actor who played one of the sheriffs or deputies or something in the film, and he had taken credit for the ending of it, and I was so mad at Andy because I knew him from, my dad's films and stuff, and then later on when I was older, I had moved to Los Angeles and went to several events with Andrew Prine. And so I told him that story, so for him to have turned around and converted it to his own, whatever, I'm going to get on to him if I see him. So anyway, that was a clarification, because my mom a lot of times did not get credit. But my dad, when she said it, she said, that's it, that's the ending, and there was pretty much, no other discussion. Now, a lot of times my dad's scripts would be loose. They wouldn't be, they were,
how many times he rewrote my lines the day before?
What?
He rewrote my lines many a times the day before. A lot of times he didn't even give me lines, he would just tell me what he wanted me to do and say in my own words. And this is a pretty nice theater we're in right here. And remember the Paramount, it was closed down. And I went in there with Dad and climbed up that hill, and the projector, he said, will the projector work? And he said, the bulb's out. So Dad bought a bulb for it, and we threw some old mattresses out from homeless people, and he bought a popcorn machine. You were there. We all went down there, me, Mom, and other sister, we got together.
He had kids and nephews and friends and everybody cleaning the Paramount because the Oakland, this was on Boggy Creek, but the Oakland wouldn't take it.
Well, now it's the parole down there, the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Oh,
when he said he was going to do Dreaded Sundown as his second film, there was a huge outcry from Dixon's mom. I think it was Betty Douglas, I think, mom. And there was opposition also from, I think, the mayor and that kind of stuff. And it was, I believe it was cited in the newspaper, but it put pressure on my dad, and I don't think that he felt comfortable that early in his career going out in case there was some kind of boycott, and they decided to, he wasn't that kind of put on the line.
Pam, I don't think
that early on.
The city of Texarkana, Dad told me this, they shut the movie down. And he was already playing, and they shut the movie down and took him to court. And they said, you can't play that movie. And he says, why? He says, because it says the Phantom could still walk the streets and walk the streets of Texarkana. My daddy said, well, in the lifespan of his age, he could still be alive, and you never caught a Phantom killer. you don't know who he is, so how am I to know he's still walking the streets of Texarkana? And then the judge said to the city of Texarkana, how much money do you have in this movie? And my daddy said, $1,250,000 or something. He says, well, the city of Texarkana has to put up $1,250,000. The city of Texarkana says, we don't have the money. And the judge said, well, let it play.
Yeah, there was like a lot of controversy about it, and I don't even think that Dad had to. I know that he had a party after he had the party actually in Shreveport. But then I got a crank call. I told Dr. John about this. Like right the first week that it opened, in the middle of early in the morning, I got a crank call from a man, and he broke his voice up, and he said, I know who you are. I can't do exactly what he said, and I know where you live. And it totally and completely freaked me out. And I told my mom, and my mother, of course, was very upset. And so my dad did have security like the first week, and I still kind of wonder if he didn't do it a little bit for show. Because I don't remember my dad really feeling threatened or acting like he was threatened. My dad was laughing, and he would tell me about the mask and how scary the movie was going to be, and he would do the breathing, like Bud Davis, who played the Phantom, he would kind of act it out for me, and he was just he was tickled pink. He was like, oh, it's going to be so scary, and then he would just laugh. I said, oh, just wait till you see it. You know, so he really had a good time scaring people.
Dad told me one time, I don't know where he got this information, but he didn't put it in the movie, but he said the Phantom Killer, when he was making an attack, always whistled a church song called Burning in the Shoes.
I was wondering, Chuck, if you might mention the shooting of the Starks attack, the final scene of the movie. You mentioned that Hollywood had been very impressed with that, and that you might be willing to talk a little bit about the technique of that tonight.
Yeah, I worked for Bob Harris on his farm sometimes. He's chief of police on the Arkansas side for many years, and he was in that part with Don Wells. Well, my daddy told me, don't ever tell him. Hollywood was always inquired about how he did some things. And I was there that night. And he said, don't tell them how they did this, because Hollywood was inquiring because they can't figure out how he did that. But he's gone now, so I might as well tell it now. Anyway, he was the Phantom sits behind that window. And he put a marker and he put a dot, and they had a blank, and he was supposed to shoot, and then they put blood behind his head, but another guy got on a mattress with a Remington pump, like a pellet gun, and he had to shoot right over Bob's head, and it was timing. So the other guy, the Phantom sits in there with a blank and pulls the trigger. The other guy's on a couch over here and shoots right to that little dot on the window and keeps him out of. It was precise. Anyway, he pulled it off, timing. And then when Don Wells was got shot and that blood flew on the wall, my daddy was under the table with a hypodermic needle with fake blood, just squirting it on the wall, timing.
So human synchronization.
Human synchronization.
Yeah. Timing and precision and stuff like that.
And Dawn told me a couple of weeks ago when I saw her in Boston that there was, when they were shooting that scene out there at Fauna, it was somebody's house, and across the street there was some kind of like a pit bull or something, and it was on a stake and a chain, and she said it was barking, and she actually like curled her lip back, and she said that the dog's lips were like, curling back, and it was growling, and really pulling hard on that chain. So I guess the security went over and said, if the dog breaks away, we're going to shoot it. And so they said, yeah, it was loose. And Dawn said that she was in the cornfield, and all of a sudden the dog, she said that she saw the dog break race, and she said she ducked, and they did shoot the dog that night. And it was like, I guess, real early, like deep into the night they were shooting. So then she was over here. She flew in at the last minute. And
yeah, that dog broke loose and bit somebody that night. And that was, in that scene, that was my mama and my papa, my father's parents that came out with the gun when Don Wells ran up there and called the ambulance for her. That was my real grandparents in that scene.
Pam, I was wondering in general what you and Chuck might think, your father would think of the new movie having been made. How might you feel about that?
Me? I feel he'd be honored for that. He'd be honored that you people are here today and about things he's done in his legacy and talk about it. I'm sure he'd be very proud.
There's sometimes like I can hear him laughing because growing up, Dad was such an outsider, when he started, and he just, to him, he would talk about the movies because John Ford and John Wayne and that kind of people were his heroes, and he loved the movies as a kid. And to him, MGM was like, that was the real big time, like, that was the movie to him. And later on, when he did do Sudden Impact, it was Warner Brothers. And I remember he was really proud to work for Warner Brothers. But I think the ultimate really for him would be MGM. And so I think it's kind of ironic that they did the movie. And even though, like, I personally don't like scary movies because my dad did like scary so much. And so I don't watch them very much. I still say that I've never watched the trombone scene all the way through because I had to cover my eyes.
Well, a little background. My daddy told me how he learned how to make a movie is he ran television stations. He ran the board at television stations for years. He had a kiddie show called The Mojo Show. Had Kermit the Frog on it before it was Sesame Street. He used to make a mark on the board. He used to make a mark on the board, and he was an artist. He was a great illustrator. And he trained Ralph McQuarrie that as a young, and he went on and drew Star Wars. He does everything spaceship, every Star Wars movie's ever had. Darth Vader's, he drew the suits. He's a famous illustrator now. My father was colorblind. I used to be playing Daniel Boone. I don't know if y'all know who Daniel Boone is, but I'd be out there playing, and my dad said, "Come here, son." I had a coonskin cap on. I'd come in there, and he'd say, and he was colorblind, but he could oil paint too. And he said, "What does my sky look like?" I said, "Well, it's blue." And he said, "Would you say that's ocean blue or sky blue?" I said, "Well, it's more ocean blue than sky blue." He grabbed some white, put some clouds in there, and he said, "What do you think about it now?" I said, "It's sky blue now." He says, "All right, you go back and play."
He was good at a lot of things. That's what we were saying. Like especially in his first early movies, he did a lot of the jobs himself. So he didn't want his name all over it so that it would come out. So some of he would substitute his name, Chuck Pierce, or he would drop his name or whatever.
Yeah, when he'd shoot I'm sorry to interrupt, Pam. When he'd be filming, he wanted to say Charles B. Pierce, written by Charles B. Pierce, directed by Charles B. Pierce, produced by Charles B. Pierce, filmed by Charles B. Pierce. His title for filming one was Chuck. Yeah. His title for Chuck Bryant, which is our middle name, Charles B. Pierce. So he'd go by Chuck Bryant when he was filming himself because he didn't want his name so many times the same way on the screen. He said it was too much.
That actually just our daughter Chloe, she's 24 and just finished her first film. She did she was a production design. So she did all set design and costume and props. It was kind of the same thing. It was an independent film, and there was a small crew, and so they had to be real judicial about, like, you know, about using, because they wore a lot of hats, and I think that's kind of a key thing is with the independent filmmakers, they do a lot of jobs themselves.
Well, I remember
Like,
that.
if you need to squirt blood on the wall, you take a syringe and somebody stands there and squirts it on there, you know what I mean?
I remember when Dad wanted to use the train station downtown in Texarkana, and it was owned by Kansas City Southern Railroad. It's a jail now, but he called up Kansas City Southern Railroad, and it was vacant, windows knocked out, and he said, "I'd like to use your train station in my movie." And they said, "Well, no deal." And he says, "No, you don't understand. I want to use your train. I'll pay you." They said, "We don't want your money. We're Kansas City Southern Railroad. We don't need your money." And so Dad called the film commissioner, which brings in money to the state. The film commissioner called the governor. The governor called Kansas City Southern Railroad, and they called Dad back and says, "You can use our train station. Just clean up your mess when you leave, free of charge."
Well, Pam, we're coming to the end of the time we had blocked for you and Chuck. However, we're going to have an end Q&A where we bring up all the panelists who are still here at this time. And it might make sense to keep you online in case anyone has any questions for Pam in particular. But Chuck, what we're going to probably do this morning is have you and the other panelists line up here at the table and turn on the mics and open up the questions from the audience about any of the presenters today.